The global geopolitical struggle for artificial intelligence centers on the confrontation between the United States and China for technological hegemony. It is characterized by the U.S. block on the supply of advanced semiconductors and cutting-edge lithographic machinery, countered by China's strategy of bridging the hardware gap through massive state funds and low-cost algorithmic optimization. This rivalry has caused a bifurcation of the global tech ecosystem, splitting the landscape between a Western bloc dominated by proprietary models and massive injections of private venture capital, and a sphere of influence led by Beijing that exports infrastructure and open-weights models to the global south under the principle of digital sovereignty, ultimately disputing control over critical compute, technical standards, and the global governance of the digital future. The U.S. bloc formally began between 2019 and 2022, when Washington turned off the tap on NVIDIA's cutting-edge chips and vetoed ASML's advanced lithography machines to curb Beijing's technological development. It is worth remembering that ASML is the only company in the world that produces extreme ultraviolet (EUV) photolithography systems used to etch microscopic circuits onto silicon wafers and create advanced processors. Far from stopping progress, the bloc triggered a paradox. Although it became harder for China to manufacture leading-edge silicon and its costs rose significantly, the country responded by injecting massive state mega-subsidies and boosting local champions like Huawei and SMIC, Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation. Furthermore, faced with a scarcity of compute megaclusters, Chinese engineers sharpened their ingenuity and created ultra-efficient AI models like DeepSeek, proving that where next-generation chips are lacking, radical mathematical optimization can keep you in the global race. The war for silicon is a chess match where the masterpieces are bus-sized machines printing microscopic circuits. At the heart of the board reigns the Dutch company ASML, the only factory on the planet capable of creating extreme ultraviolet EUV lithography scanners, veritable marvels costing up to $350 million per unit. In line with Washington's strategy, deliveries of this equipment to China were 100% vetoed, while the supply of AI's crown jewels, NVIDIA Super GPUs, was cut off cold. The shockwaves rocked the foundations of the market. NVIDIA's data center division saw China's share of its revenue plummet from 25% to under 8%, while the Asian giant responded with massive machinery purchases totaling nearly $49 billion and activated Big Fund 3, a historic $47.5 billion sovereign wealth fund. Faced with restrictions, Beijing unleashed a paradox. Its local Huawei Ascend chips grew to cover more than a third of domestic demand in China. Unable to compete through brute hardware force, its engineers turned to mathematical ingenuity. The result was the creation of ultra-efficient models like DeepSeek, demonstrating that brilliant mathematical design can challenge massive silicon farms. The financial clash over AI pits two titans with entirely opposite playbooks. The frenzy of Wall Street and Silicon Valley against the patient checkbook of the Chinese state. In the Western corner, private venture capital, VC rules. The United States operates as an unstoppable liquidity machine, funneling nearly $285.9 billion annually into AI startups and gigantic data centers. Its fuel is speed, multi-billion-dollar funding rounds seeking immediate returns, and massive foundational models powered by capital brute force. In the Asian corner, traditional private capital registers just around $12.4 billion, a theoretical disadvantage of 23 to 1. However, that figure is a mirage. Beijing plays its cards through state subsidies and government guidance funds, which have mobilized over $900 billion over the past decade, backed by sovereign megafunds like Big Fund 3, endowed with $47.5 billion. While the U.S. model invests colossal sums in massive infrastructure, Chinese public capital, targeted at subsidizing cheap energy, national clusters, and low-cost engineers, has allowed its labs to close the performance gap with top models to a margin of just 2.7%, demonstrating that public money focused on mathematical efficiency can compete on equal footing against Silicon Valley's deepest pockets. When Washington cut off access to the most advanced chips on the planet, it thought it had halted the Chinese AI train in its tracks. However, it encountered an age-old engineering lesson. When you cannot by brute force, you must invent mathematical cleverness. The Chinese response to hardware strangulation is a story of algorithmic rebellion, where the numbers lay bare the clash of philosophies. While training frontier models like OpenAI's GPT, 4, or Gemini Ultra, required estimated investments between $80 million and nearly $200 million using massive farms of tens of thousands of last-generation GPUs. The Chinese lab DeepSeek shook the sector by training its foundational V3 model for only $5.6 to $6 million using a modest cluster of NVIDIA H800 chips, a version already downgraded due to sanctions. Instead of activating the entire model for every query, a colossal energy and memory cost, models like DeepSeek V3 have 671 billion parameters in total, but only fire up 37 billion per token. It is the equivalent of having a giant library, but only paying the salary of the two librarians assisting you at that moment. They invented techniques like multi-head latent attention, MLA, to compress context memory usage by up to 80% to 90% and trained an ultra-compact 8-bit precision, FP8, enabling limited hardware to perform like elite supercomputing. This optimization slashed the commercial cost of AI. While processing 1 million tokens on Western proprietary models can run between $5 and $12. APIs from DeepSeek or Alibaba's Quinn family broke the market floor by offering rates of just 20 cents to 80 cents per million tokens. Ultimately, trade restrictions acted as an unplanned evolutionary accelerator. They forced China to transition from a passive consumer of massive silicon into a global pioneer of algorithmic efficiency. The global AI map has fractured into two irreconcilable models. The West, led by the U.S., dominates the commercial market through closed proprietary platforms that capture over 70% of enterprise software revenue under strict ethical audit and safety frameworks aligned with the EU and G7. In response, China leads the counteroffensive by distributing open-weights models like Alibaba Quinn, with over 700 million downloads, and DeepSeek, offering near-free technology to emerging economies. This strategy allows Beijing to gain ground in the global south through alliances like Waco, challenging Western regulatory standards and imposing its doctrine of digital sovereignty, where each country controls its own cyberspace without external audits.